All right, so for today, we're going to talk about don't buy new technology without following these best practices. As a technology company, we tend to over-engineer some things sometimes. So I have quite a few slides as well, like Chris. So I might wing through it pretty quickly, but we'll certainly try to get some time to take your questions at the end. This is a little self-serving for us in terms of this is geared, a little bit more towards the tech trends and the software applications that we sell and support. But we're going to highlight a bunch of things that can be used for any kind of technology. As Chris mentioned with the article, just some brief stats here. We had about 113 respondents to it. So this was sent nationwide. We had a good representation of customers all across, or companies all across the country. And about 64% had less than 15 delivery trucks. So it would be what we kind of say more that smaller to mid-size. So the remaining were a little bit larger than that. Practically all of them are doing propane, about half are doing heating oil. The vast majority are doing tank sets, installs, HVAC, or appliance service. So according to this Tech Trends article and study that we published, more than 40% of the companies that we got a response from have not had their delivery software updated in about 7 years. So that means to us that there probably should be, looking, in the relative near future, and that kind of indicates, with the next slide as well. So more than 40% are planning to replace that software within the next 3 years. So obviously that's good news. We know these things tend to cycle through intermittently. So as you, if there's people on the line here that are listening, as you go to look and evaluate these types of things, hopefully this will be beneficial for you. So we recognize that the current situation, things are definitely not what we would call normal. Having to be able to work from home, not being able to see directly and talk and interact with people. I myself and a lot of the people at Cargus, we will travel quite often. Obviously, those things aren't happening. So we understand that this might not be at the top of your priority at this point, but basically at some point you're going to need to buy technology. So now is even a more important time to think about how you can improve this. As the fuel delivery and energy suppliers and HVAC companies that are on here, you are an essential business. So you are set up to maintain operations in these unique circumstances. So one of the things we ask initially is, are you using browser or web-based applications? And if you are not, you should definitely consider this as a high priority. Cargus as a company, we're a software development company. We build and sell our own software in addition to being a value-added reseller, partner with Sage Intacct and Microsoft Dynamics products. But we have moved all of our things to the cloud. So whether it be Sage Intacct for accounting, Office 365 from Microsoft, Google Drive, we use Smartsheets for project management, Nexonia for expenses. Everybody is pretty much familiar with Microsoft Teams or Slack, those types of tools. We've used both Zoom or GoToMeetings like we are here. And then even more importantly, especially for operating a fuel delivery company with needing remote operations, is maybe using like a Ring Central product for virtual phones. So you don't necessarily have to have employees use their cell phones. So if you're working from home, you can use a virtual phone and be able to operate wherever you are. So we think this is obviously more important now than ever before. And Cargus Energy, since we've started and built it since 2005, has always been completely web-based. You can host it on-premise or in the cloud. We'll talk a few things about that down the road here. But our mobile applications for delivery drivers and service techs are completely wireless. So all the updating of the app and the data can happen remotely. All right, so if you're getting to the point now, you're thinking about, evaluating, maybe replacing your back office software. How do you do it? So these are the 4 steps that we have kind of outlined for you here. So the first one is do your research. Chris really kind of mentioned about, a lot of people are doing a Google search on their phone or any kind of device, and might have made up their mind already. By the time they've done that search. The other big thing is to ask your colleagues in the business, right? What software are they using, and things like that. Probably underrated, like one most important thing that we see is making sure the product is set up, essentially for your business. There's lots of configuration options. We'll dig into some of that detail later down the road, but there's lots of examples of good software that hasn't been configured right or data's not right. So that's definitely essential. Cannot stress that investing your team in the whole process, obviously very, very, very important. And then, that piece of it really lays the groundwork for your ongoing success. So, all right, so how do we find that right product? These are the stages of the buying process here. You can see and read that there for yourself. So we'll dig in and get into the nuts and bolts here. So research. You can pull up your phone, you can search fuel delivery software, and as Chris pointed out, you'll get that typical Google list, and you can drill in and look and find those types of solutions. Absolutely search the web, ask your friends, ask your colleagues, who you're in business with, attend conferences, whether they be virtually like this or in person, and hopefully we get to join that or be able to do that again here sooner rather than later. Other things I would stress is, and you see it through like Warren Thoughts and other things, is join some best practices groups. Those are really, really great resources for a lot of people. You can talk to companies that are in different areas of the country or do different businesses. I think Jim Townsend mentioned that earlier today too as well. It's definitely a great resource to find and see and hear what other companies are using. And then, view webinars too. So there's a lot of companies, there's a lot of good content out there. So don't hesitate to look and drill into that. So what should you think about as you go through this process? What are your biggest problems? What do you really need most, right? What is the thing that's most important to you? What are the tasks or processes that the new tools need to manage? Like, how does your business run? Obviously, the cost is an important factor. What you think it's going to take in order to replace that solution. Should you host it on site in your 4 walls? Adam was talking about a little bit earlier about some of the flooding and other issues that have taken place over the number of years. So do you want to be at the mercy of the weather and other things that are out of your control to have an on-site server? There's a lot of redundancy through the cloud that you can certainly take advantage of. I'm doing the presentation through Google Drive, so it's a much easier, better way to do that. And then really the setup and configuration, again, we're going to stress that point quite a bit throughout this. So as I mentioned, don't forget about your team. Really get them involved in the process. Doesn't mean you need to get everybody involved, from all your drivers. We've had times when we've done presentations on site at customers and did it in the garage one time, and remember, literally the whole company was there. That was awesome. It was great. It was good, but you don't always need everybody involved. So, who's going to be using the software? It is definitely something that affects all of your operations. So we'll make sure that, customer service, drivers, techs are involved in the process at some point. And the other key thing to really note is, the people that are leading the search, whether it's an owner or president or maybe even IT, if you're big enough to have that, sometimes those people who are leading the decision process aren't necessarily the biggest users of the software. So, so keep in mind, what your employees, what they're doing each and every day. on that daily basis, right? You should be able to see that kind of day in the life process. So what are those big pain points? You know, if you have to manually renew budgets every month or every year, things like that. If you're not integrated with tank monitors, those types of things. And then exactly what do you want to change most? What do you want to get better at? You know, we talk about being more productive, more efficient. Those are a lot of those key points, and focus on what's important for you. So know your options here, know what you're looking for. You can figure out which products match those needs. And one good way to kind of narrow down that is through a RFP, or request for proposal process. These are good and bad in some cases, you know, from our perspective. I've written a fair amount of RFPs back in the day when I used to lead up IT and you know, be a fuel delivery operation. But they can be a little formalized. They can be a little bit, you know, you got to hold to this particular specific process. And sometimes there's group calls with a lot of different vendors. It's kind of can be a little bit confusing sometimes from that standpoint. But what is good about it is that it can document the process, you know, state your specific goals and objectives, and really kind of level that playing field. So as long as you have those clear parameters, you know, that's good. It can take longer on the negative side. You know, there is room for, you know, sometimes to things be misunderstood. You can't always necessarily talk to, you know, the vendor or have that two-way communication that you might like. And it might not always be focused on, you know, what you need down the road, right? So, you know, those things are important. It's not just the product that you're looking at the company. So it also tends to strip away a little bit of the personality and the creativity that, you know, vendors have. You might answer in an RFP that, hey, you don't do, you know, a particular feature, but oftentimes there are, you know, various ways or workarounds to do that. All right, so how do you do, how do you get some of this more detailed information, or how does your software company get more of this information? So you do what we like to call is detailed discovery. Obviously, most of these energy companies, you know, that throughout the country do all the same basic things, but everybody can be a little bit unique. And, you know, whereas, you know, some companies, you know, might focus on heating oil and propane and HVAC, especially in the Northeast. You might have, you know, ones in the Southeast or Southwest that are propane only, and they do tank sets and leases and, you know, maybe appliance type of stuff. So, you know, really understanding those things that are important, getting that detailed discovery is really important. So what you should be expected to do is understand your business, how it operates. I'll often ask companies like, you know, what's your percentage of automatics versus will call? Some people know that real easily, some people don't. So, you know, what are you currently struggling with? And then more importantly, what do you want to get out of it? You know, what is your real ultimate goal for this? And then what kind of budget or timeline? One recent prospect we talked to us the other day, they were allocating 2+ years for the time to kind of implement a solution, and they thought it would take a year from start to go live. That's typically a little extreme than what we see on most projects, you know, depending on the size of a customer. They typically can take anywhere as little as 8 weeks to sometimes, you know, months, but most are in that 12-week range from when you begin a project and you can be up and running. So definitely be prepared to share that perspective. So what should you ask about with your company? You should ask about references. Okay, what experience do they have for companies like yourself? What is their specific implementation process? Who has those definitive responsibilities? What is service and training? And definitely very, very important is the software updates and product roadmap, because, you know, as we stressed in the number of percentage of companies, most companies are using, you know, they'll tend to look to think about swapping software every maybe 7 to 10 years. We've seen 20 and 30 years in some cases, but you want to make sure that the product that you're buying is going to be continuously updated. and has a product roadmap. So those are definitely things you should ask about. Do you have references we can contact? You know, how does the training work? Is it in person? You know, as you know, with the recent issues, we've done a number of projects with all remote training. It was the exception rather than the norm, but obviously going forward for the summer, you know, the majority, if not, you know, all are going to be that way. You know, how do updates get handled? You know, are they automatically applied? You know, how do new features get involved? So in the process for the roadmap. So those are all those types of things we stress that you should certainly ask about. So we talk all the time. You know, we're an employee-owned company, so we like to think and act like owners, and our culture at Cargus is very, very important to us. And so we stress that. So, you know, we know that a lot of the companies that we're talking with are family owned, and, you know, might have some process to hand the business down to, you know, family down the road. So those types of things are really, really important in understanding your process. You know, it could be challenging if the company or the solution you're buying, you know, is sold or is bought by another company. So I would definitely ask and try to understand that. And you know, because we have the mindset of thinking act like owners, you know, I've taken calls from customers, you know, all times of day and night, and you know, if they have a problem, you know, we're there to help them. So we know those types of issues are going to come out, and it's, you know, the company that you're working with, how they react to that, you know, is as important, or if not more, than the product itself. So, you know, how do you validate some of this, right? What does the vendor say on their website? Does it match the experience that you're kind of hearing with the team? So, you know, one of the first things we do when we get a prospect is we go to their website and we look, hey, do they have a new, current, modern website, or you know, was that built, you know, a long time ago? So, are you seeing the content matching, you know, with what they're presenting to the public out there? And then again, talk to the references. You know, most companies aren't going to give you bad references, but most people should be honest and be, you know, give you a good, you know, perspective on you know, how this process, especially swapping software, how this process is handled. And if anybody says it's easy, they're lying. There's definitely some ups and downs to it. All right, so next, the next point we get to is actually being able to see a demo, see it in action. What should you expect about it? You know, it should definitely be personalized. It shouldn't be something canned. It shouldn't be something that we call in our vernacular is a demo dump, meaning I'm not going to just show you every single bell and whistle or feature of our software. That really wouldn't be effective. You know, we want to show you the things that are important to you. You know, certainly ask questions if you want to drill into specific details and things like that. You know, those companies should be able to do that. It should be a live working system. You know, whether you know, as Amos was showing, like a live customer, or you know, a live version of an application. We do that with the hosted sites that we work with. So you know, I dispatch out to mobile delivery and tickets and service techs, and so you're able to see all that. So that we definitely think is important. So it shouldn't be, you know, a PowerPoint or presentation like this, at least not the majority of it, or it shouldn't be a video, even though I think the video we showed earlier was really cool and stuff like that. You know, a demo should be, you know, real software. You know, we talked about in-person or remote. You know, today, obviously, we're all remote. This is more and more the norm, and I think will certainly be the case. Is it certainly more effective? We feel, you know, being on site for a demo, absolutely. You can see and touch mobile devices, but you know, with webcams and everything else, you can see that anywhere nowadays. You know, make sure you cover all the important components that you have, and again, definitely stress your questions. Prepare your priority list. I can say that. So prepare that list really ahead of time so tick off those items that are important to you and make sure those are covered so that you ask and drill into those as need be. So who should be there? Definitely your search team, anybody helping with that selection process, the decision maker, anybody who's certainly responsible for approving or purchasing the budget, any of those key users, a few people who use the current software on a daily basis and will know all those things. And sometimes the IT or technical team, definitely some of the operations folks. So it, again, doesn't have to be everybody. If you want to do a deeper dive on specific areas, you can schedule or segment and do a specific hour on a specifically focused thing. So you can do that separately if need be, and it shouldn't be only one demo. It should be a jumping off process in the software evaluation. So that initial demo should be able to give you that good day in the life overview. But then again, as you need to drill into other things, you should be able to do that. So definitely make sure it's meeting your top requirements. In this day and age with the way we think about and operate with software, how simple and intuitive it should be. If you hire new employees, how hard is it to get them up and running on that software? So that's definitely important. New, younger employees are going to want to use new, modern software. If they're still using software from pre-2000, you might not be able to keep those employees around. That is part of the job satisfaction process. Definitely, drill into the reporting capabilities. Understand how the user and security roles and controls are built in with the process. If you're a bigger operation with multiple divisions and things like that, and you want to segment data and limit who can access what, and restrict certain access to certain things, make sure that you're there. Again, talked about the things that you want to do a deeper dive into, and then definitely highlight the missing functionality. So if something is a must-have for you, make sure you understand that. There might be workarounds. There might be other ways to do that. There might be other third-party products. Make sure you have a full understanding of that. And then how confident are you in the vendor? There is a certain feel that you get when you talk to anybody and talk to those references about that. All right, probably one of the more important things is the pricing, right? So what is the solution cost? And we talk about this, with regards to, specifically like return on investment and things like that. So we'll dig into that in the next slide here. So what are the details of the solution? So there's typically like 3 components for these types of software solutions. So there's the actual software. Most are you're buying licenses for the software, so there's a typically upfront cost to that. If you need any hardware, whether it be server or more often now in the case in mobile devices, what is the hardware cost? What kind of hardware do they support? That is definitely an important thing. If you're supporting newer Android stuff out in the field, those things are much cheaper. Have a little shorter time span, life cycle, but they're definitely cheaper. So understanding that hardware cost. And then the services cost, what is the cost to implement the software? So there is that training, there's that data conversion, there is that project management process that is very important. So we definitely stress that you have those understood. And a lot of times those services could be fixed cost and fixed scope, so make sure you understand what is covered in that scope. If you do choose to go to a time and materials, you could be billed more than you might expect, you could be billed less. So definitely have an understanding of how that works. So, and then what's the ongoing support and maintenance look like? Just because a company might not have any costs, or little to no costs on ongoing support or maintenance doesn't mean that you won't have those future costs, right? Some companies might bill by the hour for call or ticket or incident. So they may charge you also for future upgrades or updates for that you're already using. So make sure you really understand those key elements to these types of solutions and how you're going to replace. Usually it's not an apples for apples. So everybody, not everybody as much anymore, but a lot of people will talk about ROI. How do you evaluate ROI? So the first thing, I'll definitely say is, be wary of guarantees. If somebody says, hey, we can guarantee 15% or you'll pay for the system in 18 months, those are very blanket statements that are very, very hard to prove. There's a lot of variables. We've done deep dive ROIs, typically in the past. We don't see them as much very often. But I would stress it's not as incumbent on the software company to provide that ROI, that you yourself as the buyer really should, kind of self-evaluate that. So it's definitely those quantitative, things that you want to measure, but it's also the qualitative, right? So it's not just, how easy or how simple it is, to reduce the time and things like that, but what's the quality of it? Can you deliver more, fuel, more gallons fuel or miles? Do you have tank monitor integration, reduction in runouts? Do you have integration with the customer portal? Those are all factors that can, build into the results. So, but certainly ask the vendor what you are. We'll stress some, scenarios that, typically be, on both ends of the extreme. And the best way to do it then is really measure those results. So if you, kind of get an idea of where you stand beforehand, as you're going through that process, and then, look at it 6 months, a year, 18 months, down the road. So, don't hesitate to go back and do that. Cargus ourselves, we do like an NPS and that promoter score each year. So, you should kind of do that yourself as well. And then again, don't forget about the services value, kind of what I indicated it before in terms of, how those services, what you're paying for and what you're getting, even though there might not be any upfront costs there, there might be some future costs that aren't in that specific ROI. All right, so you get to the point where you finally buy the software, you purchase it, you think it might be the finish line, but you're just kicking it off. So the number 2 point we'd like to stress here, as we indicated in the initial review slides, was, again, making sure this is set up properly for your business. Right, be involved. It's really good to have an understanding of how the software works, because it very much impacts, how you set that up. Can't emphasize this enough. How a software solution works for your company could definitely be different, than another company is using it, even in your same area. There are lots of different options. There's lots of ways you can configure things to work differently. So make sure you drill into those. If you make a change, see what happens. See what the results are. All right, so as a company, as Cargus, we've done about 1,000 plus software implementations over 30 plus years in all kinds of different industries. So we do have an understanding of what's, a good successful implementation. Understand your responsibilities, versus what the software company is handing. Definitely stress this is a two-way street. Don't expect the software company to do all of these things for you. It's very important that you take ownership of the product. If you're on a shortened time frame, if you're doing this, within that 8-week time frame, understand those milestones, right? If I need to get trucks set up so that they are available to be running, make sure I've, scheduled that and plan appropriately. Appoint a project manager, so somebody within your operations who, they don't have to be a subject matter expert. They don't have to know all the ins and outs of how K-factors work or scheduling service calls or things like that. But they need to be somebody who's really good at coordinating, wrangling everybody up, making sure people are doing their roles, give them that authority, make sure they, have that capability to do that. Your project manager should work with the project manager with the software company, and those should be the ones that are communicating, directly, sharing that information, and then assigning those roles. Making sure that implementation team has those clear ideas of what they are. If you're the delivery dispatch person, make sure you test the mobile before your drivers are out there using it. Make sure you understand how reloading, fuel and inventory works and things like that. So make sure everybody understands their responsibilities. And,
Hey, and Saul, we actually
sure.
had a question. I'd be curious your take on it.
Sure, go ahead.
Yeah, it asked about a system documentation, and you kind of mentioned a little bit about that. But how much of a role should that play? And it's really kind of referring that about the systems flows, data dictionary, things like that.
Yeah. So yeah, absolutely. There should be documentation. There's lots of different ways those documentations can take form. We've moved within our application to a lot of on-screen help. And so, just like you can in Google or any, site nowadays, you can start typing something and you'll get immediate, answers back that will kind of provide you that. For the implementation piece, there's definitely training and documents that will walk you through how the application works. Us as we don't provide any software without the corresponding documentation with that. So as we release updates, we make sure that's there as well. We also provide a lot of videos for that. So if you forget how to renew budgets, you can click and watch a couple-minute video, and it'll kind of walk you through that. I would stress that is to taking those sources, taking those documentations, and kind of building your own process for that, and almost internalizing that and making your own document that would be your company's internal process and procedures. We have a way that we think the software can work, but every company, like you said, can be a little bit different. So internalize that, make sure that works for you, because there's, again, typically so many choices and drop downs. So make sure you have an understanding of that. That was a good question. Thanks, Chris. All right, so data is really, really important. Cleaning up the data, companies ask us about that all the time. Typically, you'll go through some kind of conversion process. If you don't have data, there should be templates or ways to key in data to do that. We like you validate your data in our solution so you can kind of compare it apples to apples from the other solutions. So you should be able to see that and get a real good bird's eye view of how a customer looks in the new system versus the old system. Can't stress enough the time and effort to training. Make sure people have some segmented time from their day in, day out jobs. If you're going through an implementation like this, you're basically are adding a lot more work to people. So make sure you get some time segmented so that you can train. And then test. Test and then do it again. Make sure things work the way that you expect them to work. Engage your team. Make sure they are all on board. There's nothing worse than the naysayer that we've seen, in certain cases, and maybe they're not, in tune with change as much as other people, and they struggle with that. So we recognize there's all types. Sometimes people take a little bit more time to get comfortable with that process, but as long as they're involved in it, maybe involve them in the research and implementation, maybe you can get over some of those hurdles. Again, assign those specific roles, ask for their opinions, listen to those recommendations, let them know when the time is right. We talk about who's going to be impacted by this new tool. Again, a solution like this is typically everybody. It's all your operations and stuff like that. Make sure you understand these processes and it can help guide through it. One thing you might want to do too as well is include your customers in this. So update your website and maybe include some outgoing content with your customers, whether it be on an invoice or a statement or letters, or if you're using a customer portal, those types of things. So definitely not just internally, include your team in the process, but make sure your customers know. We've seen some pretty creative things in letting our customers know that. And you always hear when customer service is taking a call, it's like, oh, we just switched systems or things like that, and things like that. So the more your customers know could be helpful. All right, so getting down to the end here, I'll try to zip through some of these slides so we can take some other questions here. Tips for the user adoption, not just market to your customers, but market to your employees. They should definitely be on board with this. Jim and Adam stressed that clear and ongoing communication. Definitely agree with that. Again, some people might not like it, but say, hey, this is where we're going through, and make sure they understand that. So if the management team isn't using the solution as well, that can certainly cause problems. So make sure everybody is walking that walk, and use your implementation team to engage in their peers, right? Talk to other companies, identify those best practices, really understand those specific roles, and talk to some of those other peers that you may know. Hold internal training sessions. Again, when I talked about adopting the documentation and things like that was asked, make it your own document. We all have these internal processes. A lot of them are learned or passed down from, employee to employee, but, it's real easy now to, set up and construct these internal documents and things, and have that, and, talk to people one-on-one if need be. Adopt some incentives. You're trying to incentivize salespeople and stuff like that. Create some internal rewards and user adoption for people, and then definitely set the goals and communicate these results. So have a good understanding of what we want to accomplish, where do we stand, and then what we need to get there. So how do you set yourself up for ongoing success? You've made it through the implementation. A lot of project managers have handled lots of projects over the years, and there's always that period after a go live or after you've been live that there's this kind of, it's a little bit of that buyer's remorse sometimes. So we know you're going to have these hurdles, whether it be with data or getting up to speed, but you got to really push through it. We see a lot of those things happen to a lot of those companies. So what you do next is just as important. So follow up after the go live. Make sure you tie up those loose ends, whether it be data or process. We see a lot of companies that we talk with that don't want to talk to their software company because whether support tickets cost money or they feel like they're not going to get answers. We actually put our support login on the homepage so that you can engage and be able to interact with our help team right from there. So that's really effective. You can use some of the messaging tools to engage with users, and then if you have that unlimited support and things like that, definitely take advantage of it. That content is there for you. You want to take ownership of it. You want to have an understanding of it, so that you can make it a little bit more meaningful for you. Create a training process. Make sure you take advantage of those learning opportunities. Again, use those videos, use that content. Cargus is a company, we publish software updates anywhere from 4 to 6 times a year. We come out with a monthly letter, newsletter that goes out to all of ours. So, you should not know that there's updates to your software and what those updates are. Make sure you're aware of them. We typically have all our customers, set up a sandbox or a test site so you can get it dirty. So those updates can typically be done there. And then if your needs change, a lot of the companies we work with, they are purchasing new companies or growing organically. Maybe they're adding, some other features or bells and whistles. So make sure you communicate with your vendors as those needs change so that they understand that. Some of the common tips and things to avoid. Highlighted some of these things. We'll never take or miss the opportunity to kind of stress them again. Make sure that the team, if the problem is your team was involved in the process, certainly ask what they need. Just don't say it's a problem and don't do anything about it. But what can we do to get you over that hump? If you were focused really on just finding, the product only, definitely make sure you ask about that implementation process, that vendor, who they are, talk to those references, how do they handle support, things like that. If you're focused only on the cost versus ROI, again, as I mentioned earlier, stress internally how you're going to pay for this. Sometimes the solution might be more expensive than you think. We get a little shock sometimes when we say what the cost of the solution is, because it's more expensive than people think. But there has to be an ROI for it. You shouldn't just be doing it for your sake. You might need to upgrade. You might have old hardware or software that's no longer supported. But you shouldn't do this just to do it. You should make sure it's going to be effective for your company. If you're not really focused on that user adoption, make that a priority.
So Saul, I think from a timing perspective, it probably makes sense to get into some of the really good questions. Is there anything else you wanted to kind of mention before we get into that?
There's a few more slides, but again, that's fine. We can go ahead. Let's take some questions and make it a little bit more interactive. So shoot.
Yeah, no, we got a few, so I just wanted to make sure to get to them. One question was just on implementation, and should you have an implementation team that's solely dedicated to the project? How have you seen marketers do that and kind of focus on getting something up and running?
Yeah, that's again, we talked about hey, you still have your regular job to do. Whoever is the project manager, I would stress that should be the majority of what they are doing. If you're going through this process and it's going to take 10 or 12 weeks, there's some build up time beforehand, and there's obviously some overlap and things after you go live and support, and we do like a 100-day transition. There's all those times there. So that project manager, whoever you appoint that person, that should be their primary, if not only, responsibility. The other people, the subject matter experts, obviously they're going to have to do some other things in addition to training and getting up to speed on the product. But we all wear multiple hats. We're always doing multiple things. If you look at my other screens right now, you see multiple tabs and windows open at the same time. So that's pretty much the nature of the beast in this day and age. But definitely for the project manager, it would be their primary focus.
Gotcha. And there was a few questions also on kind of the types of systems. Especially specifically looking at cloud versus on-premise, and what people should be looking at.
Yeah, and I mean, there's lots of different ways that vendors, and I'm using air quotes, say things are cloud versus whether they really are or not. If you're using a locally installed application, then it might not be a cloud. If you're doing a remote desktop session in order to use your software, that's not what we typically call cloud, or web or browser-based software. Our solution specifically is browser-based. You have an option when you're buying it. You can host it on a server on your four walls. As a reformed IT person who bought more hardware and servers than I care to remember, my personal viewpoint is I would never ever buy server hardware ever again. I might be extreme in that case, but you can't stress it enough. Being able to work, from anywhere, just pulling up a site, putting in, just like online banking, you do it from your phone, you do it from any device, whether it be an app or a browser. You can log in with your secure ID and password and be able to do that. So The cloud offers so much more flexibility in terms of cost nowadays. I know that's a lot of the big issue, but there's also an ongoing cost, for on-premise that people probably don't estimate in total. But handling all the backup, all the redundancy, you're not an expert in computers and technology, and you might outsource it or have an IT company to do it. But this is definitely one of those things that I couldn't stress enough. Using
Great.
cloud environment.
Yeah, no, that makes total sense. Uh, for kind of two more last questions here. One, just, is there anything that you've heard with the kind of COVID-19 going on in terms of use of technology? I know you have a pretty good user community, and just curious, kind of any takeaways.
Yeah, we talked to some of our customers, and a lot of the things they're doing. Obviously, we stressed being able to work from anywhere. Some of our customers have shared we did it as kind of an online poll question, and we got some real good feedback from our customers. Some are like splitting shifts, so some people are working from home, but some people are coming in the office maybe 2 or 3 days a week. So they can certainly minimize those things. We're going to think about how we, structure our office space now. I'm sure going forward to give people a little bit more, personal space and things like that. So things like that, being able to work remotely, to be able to have these, kind of split shifts and do types of things. Those are some of the examples that we have seen.
Perfect. And just, a last thing is just, any other big takeaways that you would say if you're going to give advice to a propane marketer looking at technology or thinking about how technology kind of anchors their business?
Yeah, I mean, these propane marketers, you look at your trucks and your employees, they're, people assets, and there's, physical assets and things like that. The technology is as much of that now as anything. We had what we called the perpetual prospect. We would show or talk to them like every year or so for maybe 10 years. And every time we'd go on site, they always had a new truck. And we used to joke, we said, if you just don't buy that new truck, you would have paid for the software. So those are certain things that, I certainly would stress to keep in mind.
Yeah, no, that's a good point. And we know, and obviously we're a technology provider as well. But when you determine when to make it or buy a new truck, being able to just cut down deliveries and reduce deliveries can actually pay for that.
Yes.
As you expand your user base. So it's always a good rule of thumb to think about.